Thank you so much to all of you for showing up. Thank you to Shanti Deva Center and Sunny for hosting. Thank you so much. And this is our last session in the roadmap to happiness for right now. And I'm going to intersperse again some videos I'd like you to see, some breakout groups, discussion, and questions like that. So again, we were just discussing a bit about the homework from last week, but let's take a moment to orient our motivation in a great positive direction. So if you'd like, just close your eyes for a moment. And as you do, allow your respiration to deepen. Really deep inhalation. And slowly, as you let that breath out deeply, let go of some tension in the body and in the mind. Inhale the space of joy and positivity as much as possible. And imagining those inhalations sifting through all the different facets of your body and mind. So soaking the body and mind with more positive framework. Exhaling whatever blocks that. And just think about how some information we can get from this evening, from our time together, and from all of us, whatever contribution you care to make or you hear from someone else. Is there a way to roll that into our practice that will help us move along a path to full awakening, to becoming fully enlightened beings? Because then we're unlimited in helping all living beings. If that interests you, if it's something you'd like to include in your motivation, feel free. Just taking a moment to set that positive intention. And I'd just like you to explore for a moment anything left over from forgiveness and gratitude we've been talking about last week. The homework again is, who do we need to forgive still? Or perhaps, what haven't you forgiven yourself for? Can you explore for a moment right now? Is there benefit in what you're holding on to that you can't forgive? Is there benefit? What would a release look like in your life? And if you'd like, make a determination in your mind right now to work as best as possible on finding a way to move the forgiveness through this issue in your life, if you need to. Please relax. And slowly, when you're ready, open your eyes. I want to talk about, we have compassion and generosity left, but I want to talk about gratitude for a moment. And I'm going to show you this video. A number of you, I'm sure, have heard of Brené Brown. She's a sociologist from Texas. I've read a few of her books. I recommend them. And one of the big things she talks about is vulnerability, which is often seen in our culture as weakness. Okay? So she's transformed that a bit to say that vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And most probably, I'm not sure, but as we age, most of you may be feeling more and more vulnerable. Not necessarily, but a lot of people do. People I know with grave chronic illnesses, with intense pain, chronic pain and things like that, can feel very, very vulnerable. You know, people that need caregiving round the clock and things can feel extremely vulnerable. Okay. But sometimes we learn through that to innovate, to adapt to change, things like this. This is one of the big things she's kind of broken open. And some of you that are familiar, you know, she does TED Talks. She's written these books that are very helpful, but corporations approached her. Now she was kind of the hot thing the last 5 years. Corporations approached her and she's, you know, they all want to book her to speak at their companies. And they said, well, we really want you to speak, you know, to motivate everybody, you know, and, but we don't want you to talk about vulnerability. Like that's scary thing for people. It kind of indicates, you know, a lack of strength. And so she's just like, I can't do that. You know, this is, so it's very interesting. So I want to show this video from her being interviewed by Oprah. And I think you'll enjoy. So it's about 5 minutes. And I will share my screen. Let me just bring this video up. Here we go. And let me know if you have any trouble seeing it or you can't see it. I just need to be made host. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. Sunny is right on it. Okay. Can you see that screen there? Super Soul Sunday. Okay, great. Just going to get this out of the way.
Number 4 on living a wholehearted life and being a wholehearted person is my favorite. I mean, I think the way to course correct everything, that's why you and I are soulmates. Yes. That's why we are, because you understand that the cultivation of gratitude and joy is the way home. Whoa. And people have to know that it is something, and you say this, it's something, you say this in here, and you say it in the Gifts of Perfection, that people, you have to work at it.
Yeah, I was so off base about this before I did this. I had, you know, oh my God, this is so huge. Like I made a commitment, like to everybody I knew. I said, I will never talk about joy for the rest of my career without talking about gratitude. Because for 12 years of research, yes, I have never interviewed a single person who talks about the capacity to really experience and soften into joy who does not actively practice gratitude.
You are absolutely right about
Period.
that. See, I've done no research except with my audience for 25 years.
Yeah, except
And
for the
that-
30 years of
yeah,
the
yeah,
research
except
you've
for
done.
that.
Yeah, except for
Yeah,
that
but
little,
I've done obviously critical research, but I know that is true. As you say that, it just, a part of me, it just resonates. And I know that is true. There is no joy without gratitude.
No, and you know what's tricky?
But
As someone who studies shame and scarcity and fear, I will tell you that if you ask me what's the most terrifying, difficult emotion that we experience as humans,
yes,
I would say joy.
you would say that the most terrifying is joy?
No question.
Why?
You know, I often ask parents, I say, I'll have 5,000 parents or something in the audience, and I'll say, raise your hand if you've ever stood over your child while he or she was sleeping and thought to yourself, I love you like I didn't know was possible.
Yeah, yeah.
And then in that split second, picture something horrific happening to
What
your
if
child.
something happened to you? Yes, yeah.
How many of you have ever sat up and said, wow, work's going good, good relationship with my partner,
Yeah.
parents seem to be doing okay. Holy crap. Something
What's
bad's
going to happen? Yes.
Right. So what is that? You know what that is?
What is that?
When we lose our tolerance for vulnerability,
Lose our tolerance for vulnerability. Yeah.
joy becomes foreboding. I'm not going to feel you. I'm not going to soften into this moment of joy because
I'm scared.
I'm scared it's going to be taken away. The other shoe's going to drop.
So say that again. When we lose our tolerance for vulnerability, you said in the book, but I didn't get it this deep. Go ahead.
When we lose our tolerance
Yeah.
to be vulnerable,
Yes.
joy becomes foreboding. And so what we do in moments of joyfulness is we try to beat vulnerability to the punch. Yesterday, I'm on the plane. I'm
Yeah.
getting ready to leave. I'm taking pictures and tweeting them out. I'm on the cockpit, Super Soul Sunday, or over a bus, baby. I'm taking pictures. The plane gets down the runway and has to come back because something's wrong. I was like, I knew it. I called Steve. I said, let me just tell you something. I know because I'm fixing to meet Oprah that I'm going to die. And at my funeral,
Yeah.
you better say she was going to be on Super Soul Sunday.
Oh my goodness.
And she's like, foreboding joy, foreboding joy.
Foreboding joy.
Right. I interviewed a man who told me my whole life, I never got too excited, too joyful about anything. I just kind of stayed right in the middle. That way, if things didn't work out, I wasn't devastated. And if they did work out, it was a pleasant surprise.
Oh my goodness.
And so many people said, he said, in his 60s, he was in a car accident. His wife of 40 years was killed.
Wow.
And he said, the second I realized that she was gone, the first thing I thought was, I should have leaned harder into those moments of joy because that did not protect me from what I feel right now. We're trying to dress rehearse tragedy so we
Yes.
can beat vulnerability to the punch.
Yes.
So you know what happens? This is what the joyful people do. This is what I learned from them. In those moments where like they're getting ready to come here or they're looking at their children or their partner or something great, they get that shudder too. But you know what they do? They don't say, oh, there's that shudder of terror about feeling joyful. I'm going to dress rehearse tragedy. They say, I'm going to practice gratitude. So I just sat on that plane on the runway for 20 minutes going, I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And I think I was like BSing a little bit. I was faking. I am grateful. But gratitude is a practice. It is tangible. You can see it.
Yeah.
It's not an attitude of gratitude.
Absolutely. It is a practice. And what I found is that when you actively practice gratitude, where you concentrate on not just thinking about it, but write things down, you go through the day looking for it. You go through the day looking for it.
Isn't it amazing? It's like magic.
It is.
And you know what? I think we appreciate the little things.
Yes.
I think one of the things that happens in a culture of scarcity is we're all chasing the extraordinary and we forget. Like when I interviewed people who went through horrific things, I mean, I'm talking about the loss of children, genocide, violence, trauma. And I talked to them about what's the hardest loss. They never talked about the extraordinary things. They said, I miss the ordinary moments. I miss hearing the screen door slam and knowing my husband's home from work. I miss hearing my kids fighting in the backyard. I miss the way that my wife set the table. And those are the moments that are in front of all of us every day that we could stop and say, God, I'm grateful for this. So I'll just say right now, I'm so grateful for this.
Oh, me too.
No, I am. I'm
Me
so
too.
grateful for it.
Nice, isn't it? Oops. Sorry. Better shut that down. Goodness. I think it's I think there's some really nice things in there to think about. The ordinary, are we, some of the nice terms she's got. When we lose our tolerance for vulnerability, joy becomes foreboding. So just something that I also want you to take from here, we're going to talk at the very end, is, how are you going to move joy out into your life after this? What's possible for you? But I think it's really helpful as just discussing the end of discussion of gratitude of, do you have enough of that in your life? Are you using it? And I love those things of thinking about, we do have a thing when things are going well. Why can't we just appreciate it? But as a Buddhist practitioner, you know about samsara. Okay, as a Buddhist practitioner, you've heard about samsara, the Sanskrit word that means to cycle, to turn. Okay, we're cycling through birth, old age, sickness, and death. All of that, as I've said before, is suffering. So knowing that, the context, you could be more joyful. Like, it's a mistaken situation here. It's a broken situation. That means stuff's going to happen. Negative stuff will happen. So when a joyful moment comes, if I can just be with that, but I'm okay with my vulnerability, to know I've got a soft, gushy place in my heart, in my core. Okay. And because I'm in samsara, that's going to get activated at times. I am going to make mistakes because I'm a human. Illness will happen to me. Death is coming. Like, all of those things are happening. So why not experience the joy more purely, more present, more mindfully, and just be there with it? Can we do that? Or are we constantly up in the future? Oh, when is this going to disappear? What's going to interrupt this? I should feel guilty because I'm having joy in my life. Uh-oh, something's going to happen. So check that. Are you in touch with samsara to know this is the grounding, this is where we are, which is groundlessness. It is groundlessness. Look at now. It's a completely uncertain time. The pandemic has accentuated that, but it's always groundless with samsara. So we pretend. We've just coded some, nice icing on it to say, oh, no, it's really solid. It's really stable. Never is. So the more I can become aware of that with my vulnerability, understanding I am going to die. If we're going to age, we're going to have problems, things like that. And then those ordinary moments of joy are there all the time. All the time. So can I be there with those? Can I really appreciate those? I love what she talked about, the ordinariness, right? And just before we move on to compassion, any comments about that or about the video? Anyone would like to unmute and say? Yeah, so Naga said her TED talk is also good. Yeah, thank you. Anything else?
The questions this week really resonated for me quite a lot because they line up with a lot of my broader considerations in life. And it was very interesting to see the connectivity between the things that I didn't understand before. So that I had thought about quality of life much more as about my pain level. And now I'm getting into the degree to which other people have to help me do stuff like shower or whatever it is it might be. And that connects so immediately and profoundly to vulnerability. And so that's interesting just to sort of see that as a cycle. And until sort of thinking of those questions together, I hadn't really thought of it that way as far as all going together. That was very useful and nice. The homework questions really kind of resonated deeply this week for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Ross. Thanks for practicing and working with that. I know it's not easy. Not easy. For both of you, I imagine. You and Kelly. Yeah. Thank you. Anything else anybody wants to add or comment related to what we're just talking about? So it's a reframing really of when we talked about perspective, the first pillar of joy, but vulnerability reframes. We used to think it's weakness. I don't think that anymore. I'm very easy for me to admit my vulnerabilities to people somehow. And there's a connection in that. I'm kind of opening my heart to you to say, hey, I'm a human being. and I recognize you're a human being, and that's okay. That's okay. We're in this together. We're in this state of perfection together, getting perfected together. And I actually need you to get perfected. Have you thought about that one? I need you to get perfected. I could even say I'm just picking on Ross and Kelly for a moment. You need each other to get perfected, but this is for all of us. We need sentient beings to get enlightened. You can't do it without sentient beings. You might say, well, people irritate me. I don't want to be. You can't get enlightened without them, because especially the most irritating people show you your mind. They're even more of a treasure. So, and Rinpoche Lama Zopa Rinpoche goes through a trajectory of Buddhas come from bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas, like a Buddhist saint. Buddhas come from bodhisattvas. Okay. Bodhisattvas come from sentient beings. Like, a sentient being, that's us. We're sentient beings with a consciousness. We can develop into bodhisattvas. Absolutely. And sentient beings, so we see the trajectory of how we get enlightened, and it's basically all dependent on sentient beings. That's our path. So in a way, it better connects me with everyone. Instead of pushing people away, especially the difficult, I kind of think, can I lean into the sharp edges now and then? That's really practice. Like, this person's really irritating, you might say. Can I really explore and get curious why they're irritating me? Like, how great that I'm getting irritated. Now I've got something to work with. Can we get to that point? It's a big point. It's a big place to get to. Slowly, we work on it. Let's talk about compassion. Talk about compassion. A core paradox of happiness. We are most joyful when we focus on others, not on ourselves. Okay. So this is something the bigger world is having trouble getting, as we know. Our bigger culture. Most people are really like, I want to be happy. And I'm going to do whatever I can to get there. Whether it's setting up my life in a certain way, but I really need to keep checking that I'm happy, And most people, as you know, are not really that happy, right? The pandemic's really brought that out to us in many ways. But a lot of people I know, and some of the more balanced ones through this whole pandemic as well, are finding happiness from simple pleasures. So I found that to be really, really helpful. And again, I liked where with Brené Brown, taking the focus off the extraordinary. We're sometimes waiting for something extraordinary to happen. A lot of people get into spiritual practice. You may be able to relate to this. Their first retreat, they start meditating. We're expecting within 2 weeks, I'm going to see God. Right? Is that realistic? No. And it doesn't happen. We get disappointed. We pack up our bag and we're off to the next thing. I need it to be easy. I want it wrapped up in a nice little gold box and delivered to me, my enlightenment. Well, it just doesn't work that way. So the ordinary is very significant. And here you are in your practice. You're waiting for something extraordinary. I'm waiting for suddenly all the lights are shining and there's electricity coming out of my head. And I saw the Buddha and the Buddha manifested. Okay. I don't know too many people that's happened to. Okay. But along the way in your practice, okay, and I'll even say graduated path to enlightenment, Lam Rim is what that means, graduated path to enlightenment. But along the way, you're trying a little bit of meditation, you're doing this class, you're reading, you study, you make a little time for retreat, and you have little insights along the way, many insights. So you were started here, but with many of those little moments, you're suddenly over here. Deeper realization, deeper experience. So you keep building on that. That's significant. Can we be patient with ourselves and realize there's significance in the ordinary? There really is. But somehow, especially Americans, are not satisfied. It's got to be grandiose. I think we've been a little brainwashed from commercial advertising. We're brainwashed by Hollywood movie endings and from, so let's get real. There's incredible succulence in the ordinary moments, and we can find joy in those simple pleasures like that. And I noticed when I was living in Pennsylvania, I was so impressed with my neighbors. Some of you have heard me talk about the neighbors before. I was living between 9 kids on my side of the street. And so these are working parents, both parents working, pandemic, working at home with school-age children at home for a good year and a half. And it was extremely challenging for them. And I talked to them a lot, and I was close with them and hearing the frustrations and things. And so what they did was, in the summer, downpour of rain, as you know what happens on the East Coast, big thunderstorm, the sky gets black, downpour of rain, and damned if one of those parents didn't take the kids outside and they all ran in the rain. Simple pleasure, but something that the kids would remember. Remember that time we went out with dad and we were soaking wet? And I mean, it's warm in the summer, hot day in the 80s, and go outside, run in the rain. There was no problem. There was no, the thunder and lightning had passed and it was just pouring. And the kids were all giggling and laughing, and there's a free pleasure. So there were many things those parents did with their kids, from sledding on a nearby hill in the winter, little thing, tromping through the woods in the spring, and simple things they did to keep their kids buoyant, to keep themselves outside in the fresh air, with normal communication, without all the video games and the glommed in front of the TV. And I was so impressed by how they managed to get to do it. And they're still doing it. So we have many things like that we can do. But think about this focus on others. It's a lot of you have already been doing that, where you realize, wow, there's much more happiness there than just what I need, what's going on for me. When we have the courage to live with an open heart, we're able to feel our pain and the pain of others, but we're also able to experience more joy. Compassion, this is from Thupten Jinpa. Thupten Jinpa, as I've mentioned before, is His Holiness, the Dalai Lama's interpreter, especially when His Holiness teaches in the West. So now His Holiness is teaching via Zoom, live streaming from Dharamsala often. You can also watch the recordings if you've missed those past teachings. And sometimes if it's something where a group in the West has requested, then Jinpa translates. And he's fantastic. He's a great interpreter. He's based at McGill University. He's a professor. And he's a lovely, lovely person. He wrote a book, as some of you know, called A Fearless Heart, about compassion, a fearless heart. And he's also co-founded the compassion cultivation training at Stanford University. And but I would highly recommend A Fearless Heart. It's a great book about building compassion in yourself. And he says, compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we're confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. Compassion is what connects the feeling of empathy to acts of kindness, generosity, and other expressions of altruistic tendencies. So empathy is very much related as well to compassion. And I would say to make a distinction between pity and compassion or empathy is, I find pity is the thing that kind of keeps your hands clean and keeps you separate from the person that's suffering. Empathy really gets down in the trenches. And empathy doesn't mean that you need to experience the exact same thing that person experienced. And I'll give you an example of, if you know somebody in chronic pain, but you're not experiencing chronic pain yourself, right? So I think pity would be like, oh, wow, I'm really sorry, but I really don't want to talk to you too much about it. I mean, the background is, I really don't want to talk to you too much about it. I'm not going to say that, but I'm kind of uncomfortable and I don't know where to go with that. Empathy will get down there with you and go, how does it feel today? Like, tell me about it. I want to hear about it. Or, boy, really, really sucks, doesn't it? And you're willing to look the person in the eye, hang out there with them through all their discomfort, pain, disappointment, whatever, like that. So you can think about, how have you engaged in the past? And when was it pity? Pity's a little bit, I'm standing up here looking down at you. Doesn't really help the person at all. Can sometimes demean the person, make them feel worthless. And what would it take for you when you realize you were pitying someone? What would it take for us to come and meet them at their level, eye to eye? What's going to grow from that? We're going to get into that in one of our breakout groups. So I want you to hold on to that one, and I'll remind you. If and here, this is from His Holiness about compassion. If we see a person stuck under a rock, the goal is not to get under the rock and feel what they're feeling. It's to help remove the rock. So that's compassion from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So let's bring a little bit of self-compassion into this. We've talked a little bit about this before. Self-compassion is closely connected to self-acceptance, but is even more than the acceptance of ourselves. It's actually having compassion for our human frailties and recognizing we are vulnerable and limited like all people. Here comes this word vulnerable again. Again, it's actually having compassion for our human frailties and recognizing that we are vulnerable and limited like all people. Just think about that for a moment. And is that an experience? I was going to ask you, and you'll talk about this in breakout groups. Is that an experience that you're dealing with in life right now? For instance, are you experiencing any human frailties of yourself where you feel vulnerable, okay, limited? And I'm curious, in the breakout groups, what do you do with that? What do you do with that energy? So as a result, it's a fundamental basis for developing compassion for others. Okay. It's hard to love others as you love yourself if you don't love yourself. Right? So self-compassion, hugely important, hugely important. Okay. And let's just take a moment now. We're going to go back to a self-compassion break because I want to pattern this in your mind a little bit to think about what you can reach for when you're struggling. And a lot of people I know are struggling right now, as I'm sure you know. I mean, the number of people I know with COVID, I'm just curious, what about any of you? You know people with COVID? Oh yeah, we all do. I know many people with COVID right now. And some of them really were, on and off sick for about 3 weeks. It wasn't just an easy little ride. So again, the vulnerability comes up, self-compassion break. Okay, it starts there, starts with ourselves. Let's try this. We've done this before. Just close your eyes for a moment. Just make sure your body's comfortable, as comfortable as possible. Can you look back this week? It was very sweet. Maureen mentioning before we got started of a little meltdown she was having with her family this week. It's very common for all of us. Frustration and anger came up and it wasn't going as planned. It's very normal. But can you think of a situation like that this past week happening for you when you were feeling off balance and uncomfortable? Just find your way into that moment for a little bit and notice any discomfort that arises in your body and mind right now as you reflect on this situation. And I'd like you to continue, notice the deep breathing as you think about this situation. Because that's the very first way to work with self-compassion. Keep the breathing from happening and not being shallow, where we're not getting fed the oxygen we need to manage the situation properly. So with the self-compassion break, the first thing we engage with is mindfulness. Mindfulness. So as you deepen the respiration and you're holding that situation in your mind, we can think for a moment. This is a moment of suffering. Period. We're just identifying simply what it is and just being mindful of that. Sometimes that is good enough. And you might even put it in other words and say, this sucks. This is really challenging. Ouch. Just stay there with the moment, just applying mindfulness. Second technique we use is shared humanity. So let's engage with the situation now with our common or shared humanity by thinking many people experience suffering. Suffering is a standard situation of life. Or you might think, I'm not the only one experiencing this. Many others experience this as well. Or you might even think, I'm not alone. Our third self-compassion technique, loving kindness. Loving kindness. You may even want to put your hand on your heart or hug yourself while you think, what is it that I need to hear right now to care for myself? What is it I need to do for myself now that is kind and loving? Please relax. And slowly, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So I'm so sorry, Marianne put in the chat. I'm so sorry your grandmother passed of COVID. But yes, there's many, many people I know right now. And hopefully we've turned a corner in the States, hopefully, and it's on its way down. So again, that self-compassion break, I find so helpful to start to familiarize our minds with that so that you can reach for that when you're having the meltdown and that becomes more familiar to you. That's where I go when suddenly this isn't going according to plan. These people aren't participating. They're not cooperating. This is where I can just stop. You can even stop in the middle of a meeting, perhaps. Do my deep breathing for a moment. Come back to that. I'm just aware. Mindfulness. I'm aware I'm uncomfortable right now. Well, that's as good as it gets sometimes, but that's a big step. A lot of the planet is pushing away their discomfort, freaking out because they can't bear to be uncomfortable for a moment, and then lashing out at others, folding in on themselves, doing destructive things. And then we can move into the whole planet's struggling. And then we can move into, let's do something kind for ourselves, okay? But with the balance of a bodhicitta motivation, right? We try. Okay, more on compassion. This is from Thupten Jinpa. Again, a fearless heart. Lack of self-compassion manifests in a harsh and judgmental relationship with ourselves, right? Many people believe that unless they are critical and demanding, they will be failures. They will be unworthy of recognition and undeserving love. There's some people that go through space like that, no doubt. Here's ways to express self-compassion, This is really, really essential when we talk about compassion. There's a kind of thing in Tibetan Buddhism I find where we don't need to talk about self-compassion. It's always about freeing the other from suffering, wanting the other to be free of suffering, because we're so focused on the fundamental motivation of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, the enlightened attitude. That can I get enlightened to benefit all living beings? Well, that's super important. And that motivation we really want it touching all of our activities. But if we're not content with ourselves, which a lot of Westerners are not, Tibetans have a kind of build-in where I think they care for themselves more. There's a different value placed on their lives, the way they were raised, from my Tibetan and Sherpa friends, the way they talk about it, different family relationships. But this is ways to express self-compassion from the psychologist Kristin Neff, whom I really like. I like some of her self-compassion exercises, which that exercise came from, self-compassion break. Here's what she says, a few bullet points. We accept that there are parts of our personality that we may not be satisfied with, but we don't berate ourselves as we try to address them. Well, how's that working for you? Right? Here's another one. When we go through a difficult time, we are caring and kind to ourselves as we would be to a friend or relative. Is that how you manage? Like that? Here's another one. When we feel inadequate in some way, we remind ourselves that all people have these feelings or limitations. Is that what you do? Here's a fourth one. When things are hard, we recognize that all people go through similar challenges. And here's the last one. When we are feeling down, we try to understand this feeling with curiosity and acceptance rather than rejection or self-judgment. And I'm going to add, or self-loathing. So I use this word curiosity a lot. Okay, so once again, when we're feeling down, we try to understand this feeling with curiosity and acceptance. Okay, so I find it interesting, and as Westerners who come to Tibetan Buddhism, there tends to be a, we are about countering delusion. That's the Buddhist path. Are you countering delusion? Meaning an imbalance in your mind. When anger arises, do I have the antidotes to apply to transform that? When attachment arises, do I have the antidotes to transform that? Ignorance, jealousy, pride, fear, anxiety, depression. You get it. Delusion, imbalance. How am I countering that? Like that. So what happens is, what I notice with most Westerners, as soon as one of those delusions arises, we negatively judge ourselves very quickly. No patience, no tolerance. Okay, we forgot about samsara, we forgot that we're human beings. Well, I'm a Buddhist, so I guess I should be a Buddha already. How come I'm not a Buddha in 2 weeks? Right? You're completely squeezing yourself into this mess. It doesn't help. So you mess up and a delusion comes up in your mind. Well, that's the standard nature of being a human. You're going to suffer from delusion. I accept that about myself now. I know. Okay, well, I might even watch, and I'll sometimes with humor layer some thoughts, and I'll see a thought go by of delusion, and I'll be like, well, there's a really big moment of self-absorption. Goodness, Amy. Wow, look at that bubble. That was interesting. Oh, look at that irritation come up. Goodness. Oh, there's another piece of it. Okay, well, I'm working on it. I'm aware of it, but with kindness. But then I get curious. I love the curiosity. Isn't it interesting? When I'm with that person, I notice I'm very rattled, and then much more delusions come up. But when I'm with these people, I feel pretty level. So it does tell you to protect your space, who you want to associate with. Sometimes we can't control who we associate with, but I'll notice that, when I'm in a rush and driving fast and rushing through the store, then I'm much more impatient, and then I get more irritated with people that are slower. And so give yourself some space. Leave a little bit more time. Leave yourself 5 minutes extra time so that you can consciously, mindfully go through your errands and do something. Make dinner without being in a rush where you're resenting the other person you're making the dinner for because they never help and things. Okay. So get curious. Why am I feeling this right now? What happened? Oh, I didn't get enough sleep last night. I have a pain in my back. I didn't finish the project for work. I was a little bit short with this person and I really need to apologize. But go in there, go into your mind. That's how you get to know yourself better. That's how we start accepting ourselves more. To be gentle, to start doing that transformational process, you have to get curious. So helpful. A little bit more on compassion. This is from a psychologist, Paul Gilbert. Compassion is one of the most difficult and courageous of all of our motivations, but it's also the most healing and elevating. From Gandhi, for true love is inexhaustible. The more you give, the more you have. And if you go to draw at the true fountainhead, the more water you draw, the more abundant is its flow. Okay, what I'd like to do is we're going to go into breakout groups for 10 minutes. And I'm just going to ask, sorry, this is a little unbalanced right now, but I just want to do this because it's our last one. I'm picking on Ross and Jeff because they've been in the same group. Do you guys want to hang out together again, or do you want to change it up? Okay, they're going for it. Jeff doesn't, okay. So I'm going to create some breakout groups. Now, here's what I want you to focus on. Pity and empathy. What happened with the pity? Like, did you notice some experience in your life where this friend needed you, somebody was having a bad time, and you were standing on the mountaintop of pity looking down? What was going on for you that you didn't want to meet them eye to eye? Or when have you met somebody eye to eye? How did that go for you? Practicing the empathy, getting into empathy. How are you doing with your own vulnerability? Do you admit that to yourself or to others around you in your close circle? Are you comfortable with it? Did you ever notice that if you're not tolerant of your vulnerability or someone else's, are you blocking joy? Are you blocking joy? What could better help you in that arena? So just a few things to explore with compassion. What are some experiences that may have you practicing more compassion? And how are you getting curious with your delusions? What insights have come from that? So you can explore a few of those areas. And I'm going to put you into your groups once again. And thank you so much for your participation. Okay, we're almost there. 10 minutes. And so do be conscious of people talking. You know, if there's 3 of you in a group, I think one group has 2. If there's 3 of you, that you leave time and that you're actively listening when people are speaking. Thank you so much. So Marianne, are you still there? Okay, she's in a public setting. Okay.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you for the whole series. It's been such really, really so instructive. I've learned so much from it.
Oh,
I know
I'm
all
glad.
the
I'm so glad this
participants
is
have.
full.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
Oh, good, wonderful. Because I never know with, you know, with some of the more older timers, you've been around for a bit, and whether, you know, it's useful. I mean, I sometimes like teaching more advanced Dharma classes or straight Dharma, but I really enjoy these, especially now because people are struggling. So I'm glad that you've gotten
Yeah.
some things.
Yeah, right. Before we go on, I wanted to ask about how is Venerable Sun Tzu?
The last I heard is he is still in a coma. There's been a little bit of eye activity, you know, blinking, and I mean, apparently there could be a chance of some recovery. I think some of the doctors have been less optimistic, but I think Rinpoche still suggested certain practices that monks and nuns are doing, some of our monks and nuns group and things. So his mother's there with him. It must just be torturous for her. And there's a number of people from the Dharma Friends in Israel group. One of our Buddhist friends, there's a center as well, an FPMT center, that are, you know, continuing practice as well as prayers around the world like that. So I don't have any different news right now.
What city is he in Israel?
You know, I'm not sure. I'm not
Okay.
sure if it's Tel
What
Aviv
is it?
or,
What city is the FPMT center? Tel Aviv?
I think it's Tel Aviv. I think they're based mostly in Tel Aviv. Most of the people live there because that's the biggest city. But we've also lost this past week Rowena Mayer, you may have heard. was the director of our Santa Fe Center for many years.
Yes, yes. I think from Gendon, he sent it on his Facebook page. He had a picture of him and with her and Ricochet and I think Geshe-Shara.
That's right. Yeah. And so she's an old friend of mine, and I loved Rowena, and I think she ran the center for about 12 years. So she passed, and we did a group. There must have been like 70 of us. We're in a group online medicine Buddha puja for her with her family, with her there in the Zoom. And she passed away right at the end of the puja.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, there she was. We
Fortunate.
told her, and then at the end, she had passed right then.
Very fortunate.
Right
I heard. Was it on his Facebook page that I heard that, or one of the comments was that she had said it's time to go.
Yeah, she was pretty apparently, very aware and calm, and it just suddenly accelerated, and she really. Like she was literally 2 days before doing her practice and everything, and then it just really accelerated as cancer sometimes does. And she just went, just in a coma, and then she was gone. But great that Gendon and Geshe-la were there, and they came to the house and did all the prayers. And I mean, what fantastic death to have with 75 of your friends from the center, different friends around the country there doing the medicine Buddha puja together that Geshe-la led. And I was with Carol Karate from the San Francisco Center, and we did it together and joined. And so I think in some ways a fortunate death, if you want to, you can say that.
Absolutely. I mean, we all have to die, so
that's right.
What a wonderful way for her to
it's
go.
the most we can think of to like to have the Dharma centers do that for us. Like if you're affiliated with the Dharma Center for years, and it is the responsibility of that community to take care of its members and its community. And that's really the gift of, like, we know how churches function and synagogues, and we've developed really a wonderful path of doing that for people. And I think it's very, expected, but really a wonderful support we can lend to each other.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the best supports there can be, because, this lifetime compared to infinity, we've lived for so long, so many lifetimes. So that's great. And along with that, I don't know if this is a tangent or anything, but in terms of help, if I don't know what Land of Medicine Buddha you said has faced a lot of challenges. I'm free for I could be free for a month and to go out and help you guys. I don't know, this is just put it out there. Maybe if you need it.
You are so sweet. I will consider that. We're not quite open yet to get to that point yet, but we may. And that's brilliant. I mean, we might even be able to use some online help to support the SPC, the spiritual program, which I know you're already doing and you may be too busy. But that could be an added help in the future that, because I know there's a lot of people now with SPCs across the country that are putting the programs together. And that is an option right now while we're all remote. So absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
So thank you for offering. I really appreciate that, Sunny, because it's so nice to see also the Shanti Deva group that has really, with the pandemic, pulled itself together in such a wonderfully organized way and harmonious way, where you've got this great team of volunteers that are really creating this incredible program. It's so impressive. So I'm really thankful to all of you.
Yeah, well, I thank you. You're welcome on behalf of the really the 4 co-directors. They put it all. For the last couple of years. I mean, when it at its lowest ebb, they were able to kind of pull themselves up by their bootstraps and keep Shanti Deva going. And that's wonderfully fortunate for New York,
It's been very impressive, and because I know the struggles you guys have had in the past, and you guys are it's a center always close to my heart because, at one point I was the leading teacher and I had a lot of connection, and Rinpoche said, that to them that they should get me to teach and I should help. And, just being involved much more when I was living nearby. And So it's always close to my heart, and I'm so happy what you guys are doing.
Oh.
And I'm so happy I can keep teaching for you. So it's really nice. It's really a joy for me. So, okay, let me
Right.
go back to the breakout groups and give them,
Yes.
I think it's been about, maybe it's been about 10 minutes, I think.
I haven't kept track. It doesn't feel like 10 minutes, but maybe it just flew by.
But you know what? I can't find the breakout groups, how to get back in to, oops, how to tell them it's over. Uh-oh.
At the bottom, it says broadcast message to all. At the bottom of the breakout rooms in progress.
I don't see the breakout group thing. That window's gone. Do you have it on your thing? Maybe
Yes.
can you just end the groups?
Sure. What
Great.
broadcast message to all? What do you want me to say?
You don't need to text them, just end it. And it should give them
Closure.
60 more seconds. Yeah.
Got it. All right, there it goes. 60
Oh,
seconds.
there it is. Now it came out. Okay, great. I lost that window for a moment. Great.
Yep. Yep.
Wonderful.
Yep. Yeah. So, okay.
I think it's been about 10 minutes, so that's good.
Good. Brene Brown, it sounds very inspiring. I'll have to listen to her TED Talks.
Oh, she's great. I've read a couple of her books, and I would really recommend. It's just a nice, different way of thinking about it. And I sometimes use her 10 guideposts for wholesome living that was one, there was one quoted in the Oprah thing, and I really like that.
It was a nice interview.
Yeah, it
Nice
was very
video.
nice. And I
Yeah.
think it really does speak about, what happens with we're afraid to feel joy. It's very scary, really, because and for me, I would put it into the Dharma, because we forgot samsara's nature. We
Yeah,
forgot,
yeah.
so you can have more joy when you realize this is
Mhm.
fleeting. Like, why, then you'd have more joy.
Yeah,
Like that.
gratitude.
Welcome back, everyone. Please, how did it go? What insights? Any comments you'd like to say? I see some of you smiling from your groups. Was it a good group? If anyone wants to unmute, any surprises or things anything you learned?
Well, I was just thinking that, you were talking about the difference between pity and compassion, and how that's, sometimes it's that aspect of like looking down on people. But I also think like the big difference is the vulnerability, and that when you are pitying people, you're not willing to be vulnerable and feel how they feel, or like that doesn't lead to compassion or empathy. So that pity is really a form of self-protection, that you're not willing to put yourself in their shoes.
You got it. You got it. Very well said. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you're staying separate, I can't go there.
One thing that came up for us is mistaking pity for empathy. And sometimes you may feel pity, and especially with like having a Buddhist practice, you'll feel pity and then pat yourself on the back and be like, hey, I felt compassion. And also I thought of the phrase of being the bigger person, and that kind of poses the, putting yourself on a high horse just for, hearing somebody out or stepping away or not engaging, and then how that can feed into pity more.
Absolutely. Well said. Absolutely. So much so. Yeah. Very, very good points. Absolutely. It is an interesting thing to say, oh, being the bigger person, it's like, really, and it makes the other person small, really, so again, absolutely.
We had a few good points brought up in our group too, and it was interesting. The word that Craig used was that the permission to be vulnerable came up, and that it took a lot of emotional courage to be able to be vulnerable, and that in our generation, but Ellie was a young one, but in our generation, like self-compassion was like selfish, but there was a difference, and that once you were able to establish some self-compassion, you realized that you were one with humanity. You weren't on your own.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Absolutely. Oh, fantastic. You guys have been great in this. I have to say this all these weeks. It's great to have a group that really participates and engages. So thank you so much. That's really well said. Really nicely said when you think about it. Well, thank you so much for the comments. Okay, let me go into, I've got a couple other things, and I've got another video I want you to watch. We're moving into, this is the last of the pillars, of the 8 pillars, and this is the last pillar of heart, is generosity. And there's a lot more we could say about all these pillars, but in our time remaining, generosity. This is from Rumi. Are you jealous of the ocean's generosity? Why would you refuse to give this joy to anyone? Fish don't hold the sacred liquid in cups. They swim the huge fluid freedom. Additional about generosity. The Dead Sea receives fresh water, but it has no outlet. So it doesn't pass the water out. It receives beautiful water from the rivers, and the water goes dank. And that's why it's the Dead Sea. It receives and does not give. And we are made much that way ourselves. We receive and we must give. In the end, generosity is the best way of becoming more and more and more joyful. Another thing I wanted to say about generosity is and I mentioned this, I believe I mentioned this last week, is in Buddhism, we have something called the 6 perfections. It's behavior that you perfect, and you need to perfect it to get enlightened. And you perfect it by having a bodhicitta motivation. This motivation, I want to become a Buddha to benefit all living beings. So I'm going to practice generosity with that thought. The more I can think about emptiness as well, having that proper view of reality, then it makes it perfect, makes it a perfect act of giving. Okay. And there's different ways we give. It's not just about material giving, but the same thing with generosity would be, the next one is ethical conduct. So again, you'd be refraining from harming someone, which is seen as ethical conduct, for instance, but again, with a bodhicitta motivation, okay, and some view of emptiness, ideally. Then I get into patience with the same ideas, and joyous effort or enthusiastic perseverance. It's number 4. And then concentration and wisdom are the 6 perfections. But the first one is generosity. And the reason is, as I've said before, it's from which all the other perfections flow, from which all the Dharma flows, is that generous attitude, generous mind and heart. A little bit more on generosity. Okay, charity. And I'll lump in charity here, which is a way of giving. Is every religious tradition has it. Okay, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, zakat. Okay, and then you get into Judaism. Okay, very related to Islam. Okay, tzedakah, it's called. So they have a very similar word for it. Tzedakah in Hebrew means justice. Justice. Interesting, generosity. That generous spirit equated with justice. Okay, Hinduism and Buddhism talk about dana. Dana, the Sanskrit term. Christianity has charity. So it's obviously a very important thing in all of our spiritual traditions. There's no question. And then there's 3 kinds of generosity we often talk about in Buddhism. 3 kinds of generosity. The main kind that we're familiar with is material giving. You give people things, okay? The second one is giving them freedom from fear. Imagine that. Giving people freedom from fear. This is about comforting someone, alleviating their fears, being the ground for them, helping them, listening to them, supporting them. The third one is probably the most important, is spiritual giving. So for instance, teaching someone the Dharma, explaining some Dharma information to them so they can uproot one of their delusions. Huge space of generosity with that. Being generous of spirit is, from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, becoming an oasis of peace, a pool of serenity that ripples out to all of those around us. Okay, and we're going to watch this video right now. I think some of you have seen it. Have you seen the Thai life insurance commercial? Anybody? Okay, some people are nodding, some people not. Okay, I'm going to play this for you. See if I can find it. Here we go. It's interesting. It's about 3 minutes long. Okay.
You deserve a kiss. Mind if I make your day? Kiss is made special just for you. And you.
I don't know how to get rid of that. Okay, here we go. Okay. What makes you happy? What makes you most happy? It was a nice video, isn't it? Have many of you seen it before? Some people not, some people.
I had seen it without the subtitles. When I saw it, I didn't know it was a life insurance commercial, and it really changed it. I just saw it as a clip of life's little moments. I didn't know it was selling something.
Right. I mean, it is interesting with some commercial advertising. Some of them get it, and they'll put something like that. Now, Thailand is a Buddhist country, so generosity is one of their fundamental things. And if you've ever been to Thailand, it's it is manic, and there's businesses, and there's all not like everybody's a Buddha, but there's a different kind of culture there. I found from my visits. I haven't been there in a long time, but it's interesting how they decide to make a commercial like that. sometimes a little different than our American commercials, I suppose, but right. But very moving as well of what generosity can do to make a better world, as it says, So it's kind of like, and it's a little bit of a touchy question that people didn't answer of where do you derive joy from and what really makes you deeply happy is something you've got to consider now. Many of you already have, I know that. But I talk a lot also about what creates most meaning in your life, because that's for me where deep happiness is. They're aligned. Okay. So again, what creates deeper happiness for me is the joy. Okay. But it's very much for me aligned with finding meaning in life that's very connected for me with helping living beings, taking the focus off of myself a little bit to think about how can I help someone else? Okay. But not without my self-compassion operating. So there's this overall balance happening. So what I've said to some people before in classes is, please find meaning in your life now. Don't wait any longer if you're not sure about it. And you can experiment and explore. But so much of it for me is really tied up in taking the bigger focus off myself and thinking about how I can lend benefit to beings in any time of life, in the grocery store. Like I liked where in the commercial where it showed just little acts of kindness for the guy. Little acts of kindness, moving the plant into the path of the water so it gets watered instead of dying, little, giving an animal a little scrap of food. Not a big deal, if it's helping somebody a little bit, you don't know where that the money you're giving to a beggar is going, it could but you don't want to be attached to it. You're not asking for something in return. He wasn't asking for anything, but he got a lot in return, a lot of happiness from others in return. And then the other thing, what was nice is you could see from the shop owner witnessing him giving to the beggars, the woman and her daughter. First, he's judging negatively, right? But then he is basically, moved by the compassion, moved by the generosity. And that's what happens. It's contagious. So other people see and they go, oh, well, I can do that. I can help like that. So it's quite significant. Okay, let me just finish up with generosity okay. Generosity, again, looking at our pillars, again, is based in, and if you want to go back, it relies on compassion. Like you're going to want to give because you're based on, well, maybe I can relieve that person of suffering. And that's based on gratitude because I appreciate what I do have and realize there's joy in that. But which also comes from a place of forgiveness because I've kind of let go of some big issues I'm having holding myself and also holding others too, which comes from a level of acceptance that we're human beings and we make mistakes, which can come from my humor that I'm able to laugh at myself at times, which comes from my humility of realizing that I'm on really an equal basis with all beings. I'm not any better than anyone else, which comes from the broader perspective I have. So you see how all those pillars can then be layered one upon the other back to the beginning to perspective. From His Holiness the Dalai Lama, taking care of others, helping others, ultimately is the way to discover your own joy and to have a happy life. I've got one more video I'm going to share, but what I wanted to just do in closing so I'd like to ask you to go on from here. Don't let this drop where, okay, the class is over and on to the next thing is think about now leaving here this evening and finishing this. This is just one stepping stone, is how would you like to bring joy into your life? I'd like you to just close your eyes for a moment right now. I'd like you to just reflect. How would you like to move joy into your life more in these next coming days and weeks? How can you increase the joy in your life. I'd like you to make some realistic, practical plans right now as you reflect. What possibly can you adjust that may help you move these pillars of joy a little bit more prominently into your mind, into your heart? Just take a moment to reflect. Make some plans if you can. And just make a dedication right now to be able to do that, to bring more joy or enhance the joy that already exists in your life, in your mind, in your heart. And also that we may take whatever merit we've created from tonight and all of our weeks together to help all the beings around the planet that are completely disconnected from joy right now be able to connect. For all those needing additional healing right now from COVID or any other problems, body and mind, to be relieved of suffering, even in small ways, to be healed as quickly as possible. I'd also like to dedicate to Alea, a dear friend of mine who passed away in southern France recently, and Rowena Mayer, who was our director of our Santa Fe Center, who recently passed away, and all the others who've recently passed away, to quickly take a good rebirth, to get enlightened, to benefit all, for the long lives of our precious teachers. So thank you. Sunny's posted some things in the chat. Thank you so much. Different courses coming up, course text, things like that. Thank you very much. I want to play this last video that really brings joy to me. It's very short. This is Archbishop Desmond Tutu teaching His Holiness how to dance. It seemed like Archbishop Desmond Tutu was quite the dancer. His Holiness being a monk, it wasn't probably in the forefront of his activities, but a lovely relationship. And unfortunately, we've lost Archbishop Desmond Tutu at this point, but hopefully he will come back to our planet and we can enjoy that personality, that kind of mind again. Please, any questions in closing? Anything you'd like to check in or anything like that?
One of the prayers, or one of the things you recite sometimes at the end of closing, that talks about coming from my side or not coming from my side. I don't understand that.
Okay, great. And actually, it would be a really great prayer to finish is dedication with emptiness. I'll share my screen. And thank you for bringing that up, Margot. This is a prayer that Lama Zopa Rinpoche says is fantastic to do, to dedicate, and it's about emptiness. And what I mean by that is it's a whole other course. However, to do a dedication where you're considering, I who am dedicating, okay, lack any inherent nature whatsoever. And all the merit that I'm dedicating lacks any inherent nature. It doesn't exist from its own side and its own solidity, having its own character. This is the way, this is something we impute on all things due to our ignorance, is a solid, independent existence. So that dedication and emptiness kind of uproots that notion that is what makes us suffer. So I'm just giving you, Margot, a very quick, brief explanation, but it relates to emptiness. So let's do that. And then at some point, it would be great to have a class again on emptiness, and we could further go into that. But that's what we're trying to think about is I who am dedicating, and it's just for us to have a quick reflection. Oh, I am dedicating, lack any inherent nature. So it reminds me, because I've had some study in emptiness and meditation on emptiness and classroom time on emptiness. So immediately I kind of dissolve the concrete notion of me, the center of the universe, the most important, that really impedes all my joy. So let me just share that prayer and we can just do that dedication together. So thank you it's a nice way to close off here. To seal the merits with emptiness. Let's just think for a moment. We can recite this due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me. So what that line is doing is saying all these vast merits. Why keep a small amount that I'm dedicating? I'm going to dedicate all of them. Okay. I'm also going to dedicate the merit from the numberless Buddhas. Okay. Numberless sentient beings. They've all created merit. Okay, and here it comes, which are completely empty of existing from their own side. So myself, all the Buddhas, the sentient beings, lack any concrete, solid existence like that. And then may I, and it repeats, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. So the reason Rinpoche is repeating it in this dedication is we need to soak our minds thoroughly in the right view, emptiness. That thing, when something's empty, it means it lacks inherent concrete nature. I'll give you synonyms: intrinsic value, concrete existence, independent existence, like that. So again, may I, who am completely empty of existing from my own side, achieve the state of full enlightenment. Well, that's also empty. It's also completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings, again, they're completely empty of existing from their own side to that state, which is completely empty of existing from its own side, by myself alone, whom completely empty of existing from my own side. Any understanding you have of emptiness, please reflect for a moment. And lastly, I'd like to include the long life prayers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. For Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live. long. Does that help, Margot?
It raises more questions.
Sure.
But yes, it's a
very
clear, I
profound-
have a clearer understanding.
It's a very profound part of the philosophy that's a whole course unto itself. So it's like a life. I'll put it this way. The Buddha gave 84,000 different discourses. All of them were for the purpose of getting us to realize emptiness. That's how important it is.
Mm.
So again, when you get more time and can find a class on emptiness that I know Shanti Deva Center, I'm sure offers, many centers do, definitely sign up for that. There is a DB module of emptiness. And also I just wanted to explain, if you go, I'll put in my chat, my website. If you want to go to my website, amymiller.com, then there are additional classes I'm doing for some other centers. So feel free to jump in. Some of them are starting soon. There's one for our Florida center, one for our San Francisco center, and also there'll be some courses coming up for Land of Medicine Buddha. And every Saturday morning at 9:30, well, at 8 a.m. I lead a half an hour COVID practices that are also on my website. You can jump in the Zoom room and join us for half an hour. And at 9:30 to 10:30 Pacific time, every Saturday morning, I lead meditation for an hour or so. So feel free to jump in and you can sign up through Land of Medicine Buddha and join us in the Zoom room like that if you'd like. I'd like to thank Shanti Deva Center. I'd like to thank Sunny for hosting and all of you for attending. And please, 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 if you can, please work to find that joy in your heart and in your mind as much as possible and share that with all others.
Thank you, Venerable.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sunny. Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful class.
Venerable Amy, do you have a moment for a question?
Sure.
So is there a correlation or like a similar understanding with that concept of emptiness, kind of like quantum physics, where like it doesn't exist on its own until you perceive it? So like the only meaning that we have is the meaning that we perceive or give to ourselves, but it doesn't actually really exist?
So it's related to that. That's a really good observation, Kelly. It's related to that, meaning that there's different schools of philosophical thought as to what they believe exists. So what's kind of neat, if you ever do a course on tenets, it goes through the four different philosophical schools, all the different moltings of those schools, and talks about how each one sees it. So it starts with the two Theravadan schools, where they believe there is a fundamental building block that inherently exists. Okay, but what you're talking a little bit more about, what's called the Chittamatran school, the mind-only school, where there's a school that believes that what does exist is what's stored in the storehouse consciousness, the alaya vijnana. And basically that does inherently exist. But basically they also have an interpretation that it doesn't really exist out there until the mind sees it and labels it. But then each school gets more and more subtle until you get to the Madhyamaka Prasangika, that basically there's nothing that exists inherently to them. And then you say, well, what's the wall and what's this cup? And they'll say a mere imputation. The mind labeling cup on a valid basis of designation, which means it has to be a vessel that's going to hold a liquid. This is not a valid basis designation for cup. This is not a valid basis of designation for pen, like that. So you can go through those schools and really study, and it relates very much to quantum physics and things like that. And it's very interesting if you've read any Einstein or things, or, Stephen Hawking. But Einstein, when they were into breaking down the atom. So at one point, as we know, some of us are a little bit older, the atom was the fundamental building block when I was a kid. That was the smallest thing. Then they got into quarks. Then they got into other things they call it, and minute particles. And I actually, this is interesting, but the director of the San Francisco Center now, Venerable Carol Karate, she used to work as a mechanical engineer at a lab in Berkeley called Lawrence Berkeley Lab. And she worked, believe it or not, on designing equipment that breaks down molecules. So it kind of interesting vocation for a Buddhist nun. And she did it as a Buddhist nun. That was, she worked on the side. And the reason was she supported the center in San Francisco for years. She's still doing it. It would not be there, that center, without her. So we would come home and talk about it. And when you read some of the books with Einstein, they break down the atom, break it down. But he believed in some of his writings that, and you can see they're going to continue to further break it down. So there's really nothing there because everything can be further broken down. So sometimes it gets a little scary and you go, well, what do you mean? Like, there's nothing there? There really is nothing there other than, that there's nothing there inherently. But again, everything exists, we would say, and you never want to lose this with emptiness, as a dependent arising, meaning it arises, whatever does exist, this cup arises by depending on parts, depending on causes and conditions, and according to the high school, depending on my mind, seeing a certain configuration of data, right? A valid basis, a designation that I look at and then label cup, and then the cup comes into existence, but as a mere imputation, according to the highest school. Does that help, Kelly?
Yeah, it does. I learned very well by connecting new things to things I already understand.
Sure.
So it just made me think of, like Schrodinger's cat, and that the actual act of observation is what makes it one thing or another. And until then, so that just makes sense to me that like everything we know and understand is through perception and perceiving things. And so like, who tells us that perceiving is a thing? So like,
Right.
that's kind of,
And it's the
what
same
made me
thing,
do
like
that.
if I hold this up, this is a pen, right? We'll call it pen conventionally. But the thing is, there's no inherently existent pen for all time, because if I throw it on the floor and a dog comes in the room, it could be a chew toy. So it is what we impute. And the hardest thing is what we impute on ourselves, what others impute on us, what we impute on others creates a lot of problems in the world. And until you have a direct perception of emptiness, Buddhism says your view is always wrong. It's always wrong. But again, I'm not laying a trip on anyone. I'm just saying I acknowledge from there, and here's how it works in everyday life, is you're in a meeting with people, and one of your colleagues is really irritating you, and then I start a story about them, and then I tell somebody else's story. But that's only my perspective. And because I'm not a Buddha, my perspective is limited. So every time I notice personally myself, when I get a story going about someone, I've learned over the years, and from a lot of Buddhist work we've done as communities and things, I've learned over the years to poke holes in my story and kind of first see the story, observe, and then go, wow, I bet that's not totally accurate. I bet there's another side to that story. And we have to keep posing that out there because it really deflects hostility on the planet. So really, really helpful like that. So thanks. I knew you would understand because you hang out with Ross, so I imagine you had a really good mind.
I mean, I think that's why he married me. It's,
I'm
my
sure.
beautiful mind, my beautiful empty mind.
Totally empty, which makes it beautiful. So absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you guys here. Thank you so much. So I hope you guys can join me. I think the courses coming up are Presenting the Path, a Discovering Buddhism, Presenting the Path, a Discovering Buddhism, Transforming Problems. How about that one? So you can find all those on the website. So I hope you can. And then I think we're doing a refuge one for Land of Medicine Buddha soon. And there might be some other courses popping up. And so thank you so much. Please take care of yourselves, okay? And I'll see you soon on the moon.
Say namaste.
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 I don't know what they're saying.
Bye.
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 You, Amy.
Thank you.
Good night, Sheila.